This week on The Record, Trump's picks under pressure. Can key cabinet selections endure a grueling confirmation process? U.S. Senator Eric Schmidt is on the record. A stunning reversal. Sunshine at City Hall. The segment that caught someone's attention and what's changing as a result. Who should run a major city's police department, the mayor or the governor? How state control is working in Kansas City. And could Governor-elect Mike Kehoe strip Mayor Tishaura Jones of control of the police department in St. Louis? Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas is on the record. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Republicans in Jefferson City are reviving another attempt to take control of the St. Louis Police Department away from the mayor's office and give that power to a new state board of commissioners appointed by a Republican governor. But this time, the incoming governor-elect Mike Kehoe campaigned on that promise, and voters, after all, elected him by a wide margin, 59 to 39. But not in city limits, they didn't. In the city of St. Louis, just 18% of voters opted to elect Mike Kehoe, so will his push prevail? Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas joins us now remotely from the KSHB studios in Kansas City. Mr. Mayor, great to have you with us.
It's great to be with you.
I want to ask you about the governor-elect Mike Kehoe coming into office here after winning this recent election. He's promised to uphold the state control of the police board in Kansas City and to bring it back, a state takeover of the police department, which is right now under the mayor of St. Louis's control. You're asking, first of all, do you want to see him reverse course there?
I would love to see him reverse course in the opposite direction. In Kansas City, we have continuously been under state control of the police. It does not lead to better outcomes. Non-fatal shootings are up this year in Kansas City. Homicides are down. But we continue to face any number of issues. We have a 911 crisis. We also have unsolved shootings. And if that starts to sound like some of the issues you face in St. Louis, I think it goes to show us that local control is really something that allows the people to have a stronger answer. You can get accountability from the mayor and the police chief in a way that you cannot under a state control system.
Yeah, that's why one of the reasons I'm so glad to have you with us, because you're providing perspective that really nobody else in the state has. The last remaining police department in Missouri under state control, perhaps in the nation. For a major city. Is there something that you could do as mayor if you had sole control of the police department that you cannot do today?
Well, let me tell you something. Hiring and firing the police chief, and don't get me wrong, I have great respect for the chief of police in Kansas City, but I think that is a huge and important determination. And I've had the chance to sit down with Chief Tracy in St. Louis. I think he's bringing exceptional change. You are seeing homicide numbers that have dropped precipitously over recent years. You are seeing change in St. Louis. It doesn't mean there's not a lot more work that needs to be done, but the ability to hire and fire the chief, to have that influence, is something that is vital. Another thing that's been important for us is how can we enhance police pay mid-year? How do we change different policies, whether it be parking enforcement or anything under the sun? These are all things that have to wait on a state board that meets once per month, most of whom, although they all live in Kansas City, are gubernatorial appointees who aren't hearing the same from people in the neighborhoods each and every day. I think local control is vastly better. And if you think about it, it just makes sense, right? Who's better to solve the problem than those who are closest to the problem long term? State control isn't really even necessarily state control. Instead, it's just total deference to what's ever happening at the department at any given time. And so I encourage St. Louis, and I encourage Governor-elect Kehoe and the legislature to think about what will really work beyond just talking points. In Kansas City, unfortunately, we broke a homicide record several years ago. We have flirted with that record time and time again in recent years. So I don't believe in any way that the state control return is something that will change St. Louis tremendously tomorrow. And I will note, I went to college in St. Louis for 4 years at Washington University. St. Louis has had violent crime issues for any number of years under a state control system. So I don't know if going back makes it all of a sudden better for people who have known it to have challenges for years and years and really generations in the past.
Yeah, a lot of the numbers are quite similar. That's what's striking to me. If you look at Kansas City and St. Louis side by side, you mentioned the ability to hire the chief. Well, there's also the need to hire the rank and file officers. And from 2019 to 2024, right, both Kansas City and St. Louis saw roughly the same number of officers depart. And today, both cities have roughly the same number of open, budgeted positions that, for whatever reason, the city of St. Louis and the police board of commissioners in Kansas City just can't seem to find the recruits to fill those jobs. So in the end, what's the difference?
I wonder in some ways kind of what is the exact difference, but I can speak to at least my lived experience. In Kansas City, I wouldn't necessarily compare us to another police department. I'd say, look at the Kansas City Fire Department. We just hired the highest fire department class, the largest number in the history of the state of Missouri. It was also the most diverse at 150 people. What that means is that we're able to deploy on the streets and to address any number of public safety issues in Kansas City. We want to be able to use those same tools, those same recruiting ideas, the same ways that we've been able to compensate new talent, and frankly, that same way with the police department. But we are hamstrung from doing so. So for me, it's more about how can I make sure the good things we are doing in Kansas City, and by the way, there are a lot of them. New stadium downtown, right? Having Hallmark movies filmed here. It isn't just Chiefs success. All those things are things that City Hall is able to address now, but we're closed out from when we look at the police department itself and the Board of Police Commissioners. So that's what could make a difference for us. In the St. Louis scenario, I know it is hard nationally to hire law enforcement, but I like to think that we can compete with a lot of our suburbs and others in making sure we can hire officers if only we have the tools to say, hey, this is when we're looking to hire. We're going to have you take the same civil service test that many other agencies within the city are doing. That's something that's done in New York City. And frankly, that we're not building this hardened silo between the police department and the rest of the city.
We hope to have Governor-elect Kehoe on this program in the next week or two, and we hope to ask him about this letter that you and 5 other mayors in Missouri have signed on to, asking him to help crack down on the epidemic of youth gun violence. You point out the desire of these cities in this letter to detain or arrest or charge youth who have handguns, which is a federal offense. But in Missouri state law, it is not. I want to ask you, what stops a Kansas City police officer today from detaining a 19-year-old with a handgun and referring that person for federal charges?
There are very clear impediments right now for Kansas City officers to do so. First of all, there's a concern that there will not actually be any federal charges brought. In our communications, and we respect our federal partners, but they are typically charging very different crimes, more substantial ones, and ones for people that have more extensive records. There is a prosecutorial time and ability to address the issue element to every decision that's made. We want to be able to use municipal court. We want to be able to use state court to be able to arrest, apprehend, detain longer term more of these offenders who are in possession, because we recognize those are the ones who typically will also use those firearms thereafter. Not having a huge part of our criminal justice system be able to address it is a big issue. And let's not get it twisted. The lion's share of the cases that are being filed by either our county prosecutors here in Kansas City or the circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis, creating opportunities for them to actually robustly file those charges, to actually have officers have those tools when there's pulling someone off the street and not have to think that, well, a lot of these won't be referred for prosecution thereafter, is a huge concern with what we face. I mean, we've made mistakes in Missouri. I grew up in Missouri. So I grew up in Kansas City, went to college in St. Louis, moved back to Kansas City. When we used to be able to have more tools where officers could stop people, take guns off of them, arrest them, we were a safer place. It was not a perfect place, don't get me wrong, but it was safer. Whereas now, when we have a culture of shootouts on our streets, we have people getting in rolling gun battles and all those issues, I would say to the governor-elect and to anyone, help us make a difference. And the thing about that letter you referenced is that it didn't start from Kansas City or St. Louis. It wasn't Quinton or Tashara. It started from the mayor of Springfield, Missouri. It's Springfield, it's Columbia. It is more places in our state each and every day that are saying guns flooding our streets in younger and younger hands are an issue. We want to have all the tools possible to fight it.
All right, Mr. Mayor, say hello to our friends in the KSHB newsroom there, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
A lot more of our conversation, including where Democrats went wrong, with Mayor Quinton Lucas up on KSDK.com, and tune into 5 Plus Monday night for an expanded version of this episode. We're back in a moment. At the St. Louis Sheriff's Office, all bets are off. All Betts staffers, that is. They're laid off. More than a dozen top lieutenants loyal to the outgoing sheriff, Vernon Betts, got that notice this week. There's a new sheriff in town after all, and Alfred Montgomery won't be needing their services. The acrimonious arrival is the latest turn in this turbulent transition between 2 bitter rivals whose closely contested election came down to a recount. In Illinois, the jury in former House Speaker Michael Madigan's corruption trial saw more evidence this last week. Madigan charged in a federal racketeering and bribery scheme. The jury saw secretly taped videos of Madigan promising to get a job on a state board for former House Democrat Danny Solis, former alderman rather. And lists were given to that jury this week showing 100 people Madigan recommended to Governor Pritzker to hire at the beginning of the governor's term in 2019. Prosecutors say they plan to call Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski to testify next week. President-elect Donald Trump has tapped a former Missouri congressman to lead the IRS. Billy Long has been a Trump loyalist for years, even claiming that he coined the phrase Trump train. Long served in Congress from 2011 through 2023, and in 2022 he filed to run for the U.S. Senate. On filing day, he touted Trump's autograph on his tie. He was one of the members of Congress to vote against certifying the 2020 election results. The current term for the IRS commissioner doesn't expire until 2027. Voters reinstated the right to an abortion this November in Missouri, and this week a Missouri state senator filed legislation that would put that issue back on the ballot before voters once more. Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman is the architect of that original Missouri abortion ban. Now she wants to put a different question on the ballot that would ban abortion with two exceptions: a medical emergency or rape. Trump's cabinet picks under scrutiny. Why Senator Eric Schmidt thinks Pete Hegseth is the right man for the job. A changing of the guard is coming in Washington, but as President Biden packs up the Oval Office and prepares to head for the exits, he handed his son, Hunter, a gift, a sweeping pardon on all crimes for which he was convicted and immunity from prosecution for any other crimes he may have committed over an 11-year span. Now, there is some precedent for a presidential pardon for crimes that haven't yet been charged, like when Ford pardoned Nixon. But even then, the Biden Justice Department's own website says this kind of a broad pardon is, quote, highly unusual. Senator Eric Schmidt is now on the record. Hey, Senator, thanks for joining us. I've seen some of your comments online. I just wonder, what was your reaction to the scope of President Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter?
It's shocking, unprecedented, and concerning. I think that, but I suppose my take is that it shouldn't really come as any surprise. The Justice Department tried to do this on the front end. Plan A was to get a plea deal in that did this very same thing. If you recall, the judge started asking questions, and then the Justice Department pulled back from that, and they ended up with the gun charges. Plan B then, when Plan A didn't work, was for just Joe Biden to do it himself. So I think you're even seeing Democrats being highly critical of him saying he wasn't going to do this and do this, but quite frankly, for me, it shouldn't really be that big of a surprise, sadly.
I guess I'm thinking back to high school civics class, and I was always raised to believe, maybe I was wrong, but that the Justice Department and the White House should have some degree of separation or independence from each other. Then, in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was running, we saw Bill Clinton board the plane with Attorney General Loretta Lynch, raising questions there about that. And now the Supreme Court has just flat out said, no, a president can actually give a directive to an Attorney General upon whom to target for prosecution. Apparently, those powers are upheld by this Supreme Court. So what is the right thing to do? What's the proper relationship between a president and his or her Justice Department?
Well, I think the Attorney General and the Justice Department should be guided by the law. But it is important, Mark, I think, to remember, it is a member of the president's cabinet. That person is a member of the cabinet that's chosen by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of judgment calls that the top prosecutor gets to make moving forward, and what to do and what not to do. Certainly, in my time as Attorney General in Missouri, there's a lot of stories I could tell about the things you didn't do. People, saw the things that we did do, but decisions that you make to not move forward on something. So there's a lot of those balls and strikes to be called by the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, other members of the Justice Department. But to be clear, it is a member of the President's cabinet, and so that's just a reality.
All that in mind, can you support Kash Patel to lead the FBI?
Oh, I think Kash is great. Kash Patel has been at the highest levels of government as Chief of Staff at DOD. Kash Patel was the Deputy DNI, so he's been involved in the intelligence community. He was a prosecutor himself. He was a public defender himself. He's got all the, he's got the resume necessary to go do this job. And I think people want to pull a comment here or there out. That agency, Mark, is in desperate need of reform. I mean, the FBI was going after Catholics. The FBI was going after political opponents. The FBI pre-bunked the Hunter Biden story when they knew it was real before the 2020 election. I mean, the FBI was spying on Donald Trump in 2016. So it's an agency in desperate need of reform. I've worked with a lot of men and women, in the FBI on the ground who are great folks, but the leadership, there needs to be some pretty serious change there.
You mentioned pulling out some of the comments here and there. I wonder if you think those are fair game. For example, I know Kash Patel had said he would perhaps go after journalists or people in the media, for example, for prosecution. And of course, you know that would probably violate the Constitution's First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment, perhaps. But do you think the Senate confirmation process is a proper place where people like these, appointed to these big posts in the cabinet, should be vetted and their past comments should be brought under that harsh light of scrutiny?
Absolutely, I do. I think it's the founders were this experiment they put together. The Senate is a pretty uniquely American institution for a lot of reasons, and one of that is the Senate has the advise and consent role. The president should have wide latitude on who they select for these key positions, but that is what this process is for. So it's just beginning. We're meeting with the folks that have been, nominated by the president. There'll be open hearings. A lot of these questions are going to be asked. They should be asked, and people should have an opportunity to respond, as we've seen over the years. So it is an important role that the Senate plays, and I look forward to digging in January on it.
Do I take you to mean then that you would oppose any effort to have these nominations pushed through in recess appointments?
Yeah, I don't think President Trump's talking about that right now. I think we're talking about a normal confirmation process. However, Mark, if we see obstruction efforts, the idea of recess appointments isn't anything new. It hasn't been invented. Barack Obama did it 16 times. So it's only recently that you haven't seen many recess appointments. But my preference is let's have an open hearing. I think that's President Trump's process, or his preference too, for the process to move forward in a typical way. But if the Democrats, sort of engage in obstructionism, I think all options should be on the table.
I've seen your public support for Pete Hegseth and his nomination to lead the Pentagon, but do you have concerns about his character?
He met in my office with me on Tuesday evening. We had a wide-ranging conversation. We talked about, I think, the reform agenda he wants to bring to the Pentagon, eliminating DEI, procurement reform, being innovative. We have to be more competitive with China. They want to eat our lunch and they mean business, and we need somebody who has sort of a warfighter mentality to go do that. And I asked him directly about the allegations. He denies them. He said that publicly. He said that to me. And I think it's important to note that no charges were ever brought in the first case, and these other allegations have been anonymous, Mark, and he's denied them, and we're going to move forward.
I know we're running short on time, so my last question is this. In John Thune, did you get those reforms in the Senate rules process that you were seeking?
Senator Thune was very open about having a more open amendment process. I'm thrilled to hear that. We had actually a sort of a candidate forum the night before and even the morning of, where people talked about what their vision was. And so I do think the Senate is going to be more open, and I think that's a great reform.
Senator, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
Welcome back to this part of our show where we check the record and let the record reflect. Transparency lives on at City Hall, at least in one corner. At the St. Louis Development Corporation, someone was watching last week when we made a very public appeal and urged SLDC to drop costly fines and financial barriers that might have kept us from seeing which members of its board or staff had filed conflict of interest disclosures. Those forms might detail potential financial interest that someone on staff would hold in a business before the city's development arm. Well, that got the attention of SLDC Chairman Neil Richardson. And to his credit, he saw the reasoning in our argument and agreed to drop the fine and hand over the documents we're looking for. In writing, his office tells us SLDC will waive the fees regarding Mark Maxwell's request for various conflict disclosures associated with contract procurement. But added this footnote, going forward, we won't be able to waive this fee. Well, why not? They said gathering the remaining hard copy disclosures relating to contract procurements requires taxpayer time and resources, and standard procedure requires requesters to pay for searching for a request of this size. Well, that may be the standard procedure in that department, but that's not the state law. It's not a requirement, actually. It is true that some cumbersome searches can take a lot of effort to dig up, and in this case, we just didn't feel that any disorganization or scattered paper trails within the agency should cost us and cost the public. And again, to their credit, they agreed, and apparently plan to make some improvements, too. A spokesperson for Mr. Richardson tells us, quote, "We're looking to have all physical copies digitized. We don't know yet what those documents might tell us one day. We haven't laid eyes on them just yet, but we do hope to see them soon." Why is SLDC handing them over now? They told us for the sake of transparency. I would add a second reason. This small action demonstrates effective leadership. the kind that doesn't bristle or fold or turn inward even under withering criticism. Leaders listen, even to their critics, especially to their critics, and then take the kind of action that might prove their critics wrong. That's all of our time this week. We're back again at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.